Good morning. My name is Matthew Katlabowski, and I'm with Educational Testing Service. I work for the GRE Client Relations team, and I'm here today to present on more opportunities for success with the GRE Revised General Test. Again, thank you for giving up your time today to participate, and please, during the presentation, feel free to ask or type in any questions. I'll be more than happy to read them to the group and to respond accordingly. Again, let's get started. And again, please feel free at any time to type in your questions. Okay, what we're going to cover today is we're going to talk about the GRE testing program as a whole. We're going to move into GRE Test at a glance. We're going to talk about the overview of the test itself, which includes the content and structure of the test, and scores and score reporting. We're going to then move into GRE test preparation materials, which I'm sure you'll find very useful. And lastly, we'll move into test taking strategies and talk about some additional added value items that you may not be aware of. In terms of the tests, there actually are two GRE tests. There's the GRE Revised General Test, which you're probably more familiar with, and then there's also the Subject Test. The Subject Test actually measures, the Subject Test, there's actually a variety of them, and they're actually in biochemistry, cell and molecular biology, biology, chemistry, literature and English, mathematics, physics, and psychology. Okay, in terms of the GRE Revised General Test, which I'm sure you're more familiar with, that actually is the most popular of the two tests, and that test actually will measure your verbal reasoning skills, quantitative reasoning skills, analytical writing skills, and your critical thinking. There's also something called the ETS Personal Potential Index, and we'll talk about that in more detail towards the end of the presentation. Okay, in terms of the GRE Revised General Test, there's two formats that you can take that test in. The most popular is the computer-based test, which is the majority of today's presentation, and the computer-based test is what's called continuous testing, which essentially means at any given time it's being offered at some point in some place or some location on the globe. The test itself is worldwide, $185, and the test length is 3 hours and 45 minutes. In areas of the world where either electricity or internet connectivity are issues, we still offer what's called GRE paper-based testing, but again, the percentage is very low. Paper-based testing is only offered 3 times a year, and please note those testing dates are in October, November, and February. That test again is the same price, which is $185, and the test length is 3 hours and 30 minutes. The GRE subject test that we mentioned, what subjects were included a couple slides ago, are offered only in paper-based format. They are offered in September, October, and April. The cost of the subject test is $150, and the time length is 2 hours and 50 minutes. There's many advantages of taking the GRE Revised General Test as opposed to taking maybe other tests that are available to you. The first advantage is that you can basically study anywhere. The GRE is a worldwide test. It's also offered or accepted by over 1,000 business schools worldwide, and is available in over 700 testing locations worldwide. A nice feature of the test is also that it's less expensive than other graduate admissions tests that are currently on the market. We also have a new feature called Score Select that I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in the middle of the presentation. And then, of course, there's added value to the test. And again, we'll talk about the GRE or the ETS Personal Potential Index. And we'll also talk about the GRE Search Service. Okay, in terms of the computer-based test, which the majority of you will be taking, the test is broken down into, again, analytical writing, verbal reasoning, and quantitative reasoning. Analytical writing is broken down into two what we call tasks, or you may consider them as essay questions. Each task, you will have 30 minutes per task. Again, there'll be 2 tasks included on the exam, and each task, again, is 30 minutes in length. The first task will be what's called it will require you to analyze an issue, okay? And the second will be to analyze an argument. The next two sections are verbal reasoning, and again, there's two sections of verbal reasoning, which measures your reading comprehension, your verbal and analytical reasoning abilities. Those sections are each 30 minutes in length, and there's 20 questions per section. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question of the group. If you have 30 minutes and there's 20 questions per section, what does that mean? Any answers? No. Okay. Basically what that means is you have a little over 1 minute per question. Okay? So one tip I'm going to give you right now before we move into the tips is really practice in terms of your speed. The more you practice, the better you're going to do. So again, 1 minute per, or a little over 1 minute per question is not a normal testing environment. So the only way to get your speed up and your accuracy is to really practice, with our test prep materials. Okay. We also have the quantitative reasoning section, and again, we have two sections of quantitative reasoning. Each section is 35 minutes in length. Okay. And again, there are 20 questions per section. They give you a little bit more time, again, due to the computations that you'll need to do in those particular sections. There's also an unscored section, which is not identified. So you may have an extra verbal, you may have an extra quantitative. Again, do your best on all sections. There's also a research section. The research section is identified as a research section. Again, it will not count towards your score, just like the unscored section. But again, as a courtesy, we'd ask if you could do it. We greatly appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Okay, the test as a whole will include what we call text-based questions, real-life scenarios, essentially word problems, which include data interpretation questions, questions that are going to ask you to highlight a relevant sentence within a reading passage to answer a question, questions that are going to have more than one answer, and in those types of questions you will need to get all blanks or all answers correct to get credit for the question. There is no partial question or partial credit on the GRE. And there's lastly questions that are going to have you, and you'll see in one of the examples, questions that are going to ask you to enter a numerical answer. So you're not going to be given the actual answers. You're going to see a text box, and you're going to have to do the computations on your own. Okay, within the computer-based GRE Revised General Test, again, with the verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning section, the computer is going to select the second section of the measure based on your performance of the first section. What that essentially means is your first verbal and your first quantitative sections are all going to be, you're all going to be starting on the same playing field, okay? Which means you're going to have some relatively easy questions, some moderately difficult questions, and some challenging questions. So everybody starts on the same playing field with respect to your first verbal and your first quantitative section. How well you do on the first verbal and the first quantitative section will determine the difficulty level of your next verbal and your next quantitative section. So that's what that first bullet essentially means. Okay? Within each section that you are given, all questions contribute equally to your final score. And again, both sections are important since your final score that you're going to receive on each measure is based on the total number of correct answers and the difficulty level of the questions themselves. Okay, with respect to breaks, there is one 10-minute break, and again, we're talking about the computer-based GRE Revised General Test. There is one 10-minute break after the third section of the computer-based test, and 1 minute breaks between other test sections, okay? So essentially, you do not have a lot of downtime during this exam. So please plan your time accordingly. Scratch paper is provided within the testing center, so you cannot bring your own, but you will be able to get that from the test center administrator. And you may want to replenish, again, that paper during your scheduled breaks. Okay? Remember that the timer on the computer will not stop, which means if you do an unscheduled break, it will cut into your testing time and may reflect, negatively upon your score. So really plan your time accordingly. For those of you that are taking the paper-based version of the GRE Revised General Test, there will be a 10-minute break following the analytical writing section of the exam. Okay, with respect to the new test, or the Revised General Test, It is a friendlier test, and when we see friendlier, we mean friendlier from a test-taking perspective. With the new test, it's a more natural test-taking experience, but just like when you're in a classroom environment, you can change your answers. You can mark questions on the computer and skip them and go back if time permits. And what's nice about the new version of the test is you can navigate freely within the section itself. Again, calculators are provided. It will be an on-screen calculator for those of you taking the computer-based test, and that calculator is only available during the quantitative sections of the exam. For those of you that are taking the paper-based format of the test, you will be provided a calculator from the test center administrator. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, this is an example of one of our quantitative reasoning questions. And again, this is a text-based question where you need to answer the numerical answer, so you will be given a text box. As you can see, that is the calculator that you'll be provided. It is an on-screen calculator. So again, really practice when you do your prep or your test prep to get familiar with the calculator itself. It's not a handheld calculator, again, unless you're taking the paper-based format. With the calculator, again, as you can see in the example, the answer is provided. However, at the bottom of the calculator, you'll see a button that says Transfer Display. You need to hit that button or select that button to transfer that answer into the text box, okay? And we'll talk about this later, but if you do not need to use the calculator, don't, because again, you want to save as much time as you can to do the calculation. So if that question that's in front of you, the answer is very obvious, let's say, you could just click in the text box itself and enter the answer, which is 33. Within that screenshot, you can also see the navigation buttons at the top. You see the backwards and next button that will enable you to move backwards and forwards in the exam. The help feature we encourage you to get familiar with, again, prior to taking the exam. The calculator button, again, would only be active during the quantitative reasoning sections. The mark button is when you want to mark a question again for further review. Again, only while that question or that section is still available. The review feature, again, will allow or enable you to see the questions that you've answered to make sure that you have answered them all, or to see if you have any marked, again, to come back to possibly review that question at a later time while you're still in that section. Exiting the section will enable you to leave that particular section, and of course, quitting the test as well. Again, I encourage you to get familiar with the test, and we'll talk about the resources that you have available to you right now. With respect to the score scales on the GRE Revised General Test, they are on a 130 to a 170 score scale, okay? And that's in 1-point increments. And that's for your verbal reasoning and your quantitative reasoning scores. So you're actually going to get a quantitative reasoning score, a verbal reasoning score, and each of those scores will be between 130 and 170. You're also going to get an analytical writing score, and that score scale is 0 through 6 in half-point increments. So when you do get your score reports, you're going to actually have 3 scores that will be available to you. With respect to the scoring of the verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning sections of the test, I'm actually going to read these slides since they are very detailed. Your scores within the verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning sections on each measure are based on both sections of the measure and consider the number of right answers as well as the level of difficulty of the questions. For each measure, a raw score is computed. And remember, the raw score is the number of questions that you answered correctly. The raw score is then converted to what we call as a scaled score for a process that is known as equating. Okay? The equating process accounts for minor variations in difficulty among the different test editions, as well as differences in difficulty among individual tests introduced by section-level adaptation. A given scaled score reflects the same level of performance regardless of which section was selected and when the test was taken. So I know it's very heavy, but that's basically how your verbal reasoning and your quantitative reasoning scores are derived. With respect to the analytical writing section, it's a little bit different. Each essay is actually scored by a human reader using a 6-point holistic scale, and that score is based on the overall quality of your essay in response to the assigned task. Each essay is then reviewed by a program that we have at ETS called eRater, which is essentially a scoring engine. or a computerized scoring engine. And that's used to actually monitor the human rater. So what we essentially do is make sure that the human rater and E-rater are in balance. So if the E-rater evaluation and the human score agree, the human score is used as your final score. If they disagree by a certain number, the response is then scored by a second human, and this final score is the average of the two human scores. The final scores on each essay are then averaged and rounded up to the nearest half-point interval. And a single score, again, is reported for your analytical writing measure when you receive your score report. Okay, at the end of the test, you're going to have the opportunity to what's called cancel your scores. Because of score select that we're going to talk about in a couple minutes or in more detail, I would discourage you from canceling your scores. Because now there's no longer what's called a reportable history. Again, unless there's a certain reason, such as maybe you only started the test and then you had a health issue and had to leave the testing center, there's really no other scenario that I can think of why you would need to cancel your scores. So when they ask you to cancel them, I would select the option that says no. And again, we're going to talk about why in a few minutes. Okay, if you select to report your scores, you will view your unofficial scores on the screen, and then those scores will become what's called a part of your reportable history. Remember that the GRE Revised General Test scores and subject test scores are valid for 5 years. Okay, again, you may not be aware of this, but last year we introduced something called Score Select. And Score Select lets you decide what scores you report to the institutions that you would like to send your GRE scores to. Now you have the opportunity to send the scores that you feel reflect your best or your personal reflection or your ability. You have two options. Okay, option number one is on test day. Okay, on test day, you have the opportunity to send your most recent scores, and that's the scores that you're currently taking that exam for, or you have the option of what's called all. And all scores are, let's say if you took the test 2 times prior, you would select all, and that would send all 3 administrations, again, to the schools that you designate. This is done, again, at the test center. If you're taking the paper-based version, again, you will do you will select your options during the registration process. Okay. After the test day, you have another option, and that option is the any option. When we see any, we mean the entire administration. So let's say you did take the test 3 times. Let's say you'd only like to send your first administration and your most recent administration. So that would be the any option, and you would select, again, your first administration and your last administration. Okay. Remember, score reports are $25 per report. However, when you take the exam, you do get 4 free score reports and a 5th score report if you'd like to send an additional score report to your attending institution. Okay. If you do it after the test, such as the slide that's in front of you, then it's $25 per report. So it's in your best interest to select your tests or your score reports and send them, again, before you leave that testing center. Okay, again, with Score Select, you never have to feel that you need to send all your reports. So again, you can select administrations that you feel reflect your personal best or your personal abilities. With respect to retests, we have a new policy that you may not be aware of. You actually, if you're taking the computer-based GRE Revised General Test, you can take the test every 21 days, up to 5 times per year within any continuous rolling 12-month period. With respect to the paper-based version of the GRE Revised General Test, you have the option of taking it as often as they are offered, which essentially is 3 times per year. Okay, with respect to score reporting, you're going to get an email to your GRE account enabling you or informing you that your scores are available for review or for view. It usually takes 10 to 15 days after your test administration to get your scores. So if you are going to be applying to grad school and the school that you're applying to has a particular deadline date, keep that in mind because the scores themselves, again, will take 10 to 15 days to be scored or to be received. And again, 10 to 15 days after the test for the institutions that you select to receive those score reports. So keep that in mind. Okay. Okay, with respect to test preparation materials, ETS's biggest kept secret is the fact that we do provide free test preparation materials. Those materials are the first one I encourage you all to utilize is PowerPrep 2 software. And it's actually now available not only for PCs but also for Macs. So those of you that use a Mac computer can now download the software as well. The PowerPrep 2 software is an actual simulation of the test. So it's not the actual test you're going to be taking on testing day with respect to the questions, but everything else is the same. So the more you take that exam or the more you practice, the better you're going to do. We also provide a free practice book for the paper-based GRE Revised General Test, and that's the second edition. There's also math review and math conventions. Again, all those materials or resources are free, so please feel free to use them and take advantage of those materials. We also offer the official guide to the GRE Revised General Test, and the latest edition is the second edition. It is available through our publisher, which is McGraw-Hill, and you'll also see the ETS logo. ETS logo basically certifies that that's an official or approved, ETS approved copy. There are a lot of other books out there, but this is actually the official guide that we support. We actually give the content or the contents to the publisher. Again, ETS is a testing organization. We're not a publisher, so we give that material to the publisher and they publish it on our behalf. The official guide actually includes 2 full-length practice tests, hundreds of actual questions, test questions from actual exams. There's sample analytical writing topics and, again, responses with reader commentary. It is available in paperback and ebook format and also includes the PowerPrep 2 software that we talked about in the last slide. And you should be able to get that in your bookstore on your college campuses, and it is available, again, on Amazon.com. Okay, if you're interested or you have an iPhone or an iPad, we actually just launched the Ets Giri Mobile App, and that again is available currently only on for iOS operating systems. There's a starter kit, which you see in front of you, and that's $4.99, and you can just search on your iPhone, and it is through a platform called GWiz. I know I had an issue when I first downloaded. I was uncertain if that was the ETS official or officially approved edition, and it is. So see GWiz, and again, it is the ETS official GRE guide is what you would search on your iPhone. There's also an additional plan that provides additional content, and that's available again at $19.99. There's also a Success Starter video series that we just started, and they were introduced this summer. There's actually currently 3 videos. The first one is the overview of the GRE Revised General Test. The second one is preparing for the GRE Verbal Reasoning Measure, and the last one is preparing for the GRE Quantitative Reasoning Measure. All 3 videos are available again for $7 each. There's also a service that we offer called Score It Now. If you're uncertain about your analytical writing abilities, I think it's a great service. I believe the cost of that is either $12 or $13. It enables you to write 2 GRE essays or analytical writing essays. We encourage you to do them timed, again 30 minutes per essay, to get a realistic response or score in terms of how well you write analytically. You're going to get immediate scoring with this service, and it's also going to provide you with feedback on how you can improve your analytical writing scores. When I visit college campuses and I speak with faculty, one issue they always have, or we discuss, is incoming freshmen and their ability to write effectively. So again, you may want to take advantage of this service. Okay, we're going to move into test taking strategies. And again, if anybody has any questions, I'd appreciate you typing them in the queue, and I'd be more than happy to review them with you. Okay, strategies for the verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning measures. The first one is very very obvious, and that's take advantage of the GRE test paper preparation materials that ETS provides. Become familiar with the help section of the screen, as we pointed out in an earlier slide. Again, the more familiar you are with the help feature, the less downtime you're going to take during the actual exam. Work as rapidly as you can without being careless. And again, as we mentioned earlier, since no question carries any greater weight, don't spend extra time pondering if a question that's in front of you appears difficult or challenging. Again, move on to the next question and come back to that question that's in front of you or giving you difficulty if time permits. Okay, just like you would in a normal classroom environment, we encourage you when you sit down in the testing center and you open up the first section to really go through it just like you would in a classroom environment. So go through and answer the questions that you know, okay, or that seem the most obvious. So again, go through the section the first time, working rapidly, stopping only to answer those questions that you can answer with certainty, and marking those questions that require more thought or that you do not know the answer to. Again, go back and spend time answering those questions that you marked for further review if time permits. And again, if there was questions that you weren't quite certain on, and again, you mark them, again, go back and spend more time, if that section is still available, in trying to see if that answer was the correct answer. The question that I'm always asked when I do student presentations is it better to answer a question or leave it blank? The answer is, to maximize your scores, it is better to guess at a question than to leave it blank and not answer it at all. Okay, again, don't spend too much time on the review screen, again, because that is going to detract from your test taking time. And again, as I mentioned earlier, don't use the calculator just because it's available. If the question that's in front of you is very obvious and you know the answer, click in the box and just enter that answer or select the answer that's in front of you. Okay, with analytical writing, be attentive to time. Again, you have 2 essay questions that are going to be in front of you. Each section is 30 minutes. So again, you have a very limited amount of time to answer each question. I'd encourage you to organize your thoughts and prepare outlines for each essay. Again, you will have the opportunity to use scrap paper, and with the analytical writing section in particular, the scrap paper may help you in analyzing your thoughts and putting together your essay. Save time at the end of each section to check for obvious errors, okay? You will not receive points off your essay for initial, let's say, grammatical or spelling errors. However, if they are severe or if they are persistent, okay, the same spelling error reoccurs frequently throughout the essay, then you are going to lose points and it will be detracted from the overall effectiveness of your analytical writing score, and again, your score will be lower. So again, plan accordingly. We mentioned earlier about different added values the GRE provides, and we're going to move into the first one, which is called the ETS Personal Potential Index, or PPI. Essentially, there are what's called 6 core personal attributes or soft skills. These soft skills are important in any major or any college environment, whether it be graduate school or undergraduate school. And those soft skills are knowledge and creativity, communication, teamwork, resilience, planning and organization, and finally ethics and integrity. The way the system works is, again, there's no cost to it, so it is an $80 value that accompanies the GRE Revised General Test, and it is a service that is available to you. It is similar to a standardized process, let's say, standardizing, let's say, a letter of recommendation process. So it's very similar, but it doesn't replace the letter of reference or recommendation. You can select up to 5 evaluators, so possibly faculty members, administrators that you've worked with during your college years. If you're a non-traditional student, you might select an employer reference. But again, you have up to 5 evaluators that are going to evaluate you on each of those 5 core attributes. All that information is compiled along with possible narratives from those evaluators, and it's compiled into what's called the ETS PPI report, and you can submit that report along with your college application, again, to graduate school. So you can submit that along with your GRE scores. There are some institutions that require it, some that recommend it, and again, those that neither require it nor recommend it, you have the option of sending those reports to the institutions. There's also something called the GRE Search Service, and that actually enables you to provide a free profile about yourself to institutions. So institutions can actually search on you by, let's say, your self-reported your self-reported GPA, your GRE scores, or your GRE band scores, let's say location, your gender, possibly your current major or your intended graduate major. So there's a lot of different criteria that institutions can search on. But what's nice about it, it's kind of like a matching service that enables institutions to find you. And what's nice about it is it's used by graduate and business programs. And again, if you meet the admissions requirements, at least through the search service, institutions may send you information about their programs, about financial aid opportunities, and also possibly about scholarship and fellowship programs that we offer. So if you're not 100% certain where you're going to grad school, again, it may be an easy way for you to be recruited by prospective institutions. So I encourage you, again, there's no cost, but I encourage you when you're registering to sign up for the GRE Search Service. Okay, in terms of finding out all this information that we discussed today, again, College Week Live will have this posted, I believe, for 2 weeks online. But there's also the website that we offer. There's the ETS primary website, but we actually about almost 2 years ago developed a new student site called takethegre.com. It's a very user-friendly site, and I encourage you to visit that at any time. It actually will give you information about the exam that we discussed today. It's going to give you resources in terms of test preparation materials. It's going to enable you to register, okay? And we're also on Facebook. And the nice thing about Facebook is that you can ask questions at any time and interact with other GRE test takers worldwide. There's also, I believe it's a monthly series called the Dr. Don Martin series that's hosted through ETS, and that's actually through Don Martin, who's a former Dean of Admission, and he provides really excellent advice for GRE test takers. So again, I encourage you to like us on Facebook as well. Okay, we're about at the end of the session today. So again, feel free to visit us at any time at takethegre.com. Again, like us on Facebook, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them at this time. Okay. Somebody just asked a question whether they had the opportunity to select if they can do paper-based testing or computer-based testing. The answer to this is no. It's basically, again, it's determined by the area that you reside in. So based on the area that you live will determine, again, what test that you need to take. So again, you don't select that option. It's actually selected for you based upon when you start to register in the area that you're actually going to be testing in. Okay. Somebody asked another question. If they can skip a section, and the answer to that is we'd encourage you not to. And I think I know the reason why they're asking that. Certain departments, when you apply to grad school, may say they're only going to look at your quantitative reasoning score. And that's okay for them to say that, but unless you're 100% certain that you're going to be accepted into that program, we always encourage students to do their best and complete the test in its entirety. Again, it'll give you the graduate departments a stronger, realistic opinion or score. And again, just in case that department or that institution does not accept your scores or accept you for admission, again, you can use that score again for other institutions that you will be applying to. Do you know the score scale of different universities that different universities ask for? Essentially, all the scores now are on the new score scale. So let's say if you took the test 5 years ago, that test will be converted when the score reports are sent to an estimate. Well, those institutions will be given an estimated score on the new score scale. In terms of what institutions are looking for, um, they should be published on the institution or departmental website. However, feel free to contact the graduate admissions office, or if you have a graduate admissions representative that you're working with, and ask them directly if there's a minimum score requirement that they're looking for, or if there's an average score that you should be striving for, and that'll help you in determining or gauging if you need to take the test again. So I hope that helps answer that question. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I guess not. Again, I thank you so much for signing up today, and I wanted to take this time to not only say thank you, but to wish you the best of luck in your pursuit of your graduate studies. Again, there are a lot of institutions that are out there, so please do your research, look at their programs. If you have the opportunity to visit their campuses, that's another thing I always suggest. I worked in admissions for over 20 years, and I really encourage you to interact as much as possible with the institutions that you're looking for prior to making your commitment. So again, go online, go on their websites, research their programs, look at the strength of their faculty. If you want, look at their career services department, speak to their career services folks. Again, if you can visit the campus, that will give you a great opportunity. If not, I know a lot of campuses do like virtual tours or virtual events. Then I would definitely take advantage of them as well. But really, be proactive and be very interactive with the institution. The more interactive you are with them, I think the better fit that you'll find with that department. Again, there's a lot of programs and a lot of schools, but you really want to make sure that you find the perfect fit for you. And again, I thank you so much, and again, the best of luck, and I hope you get into the graduate programs of your choice. Have a great day. Thank you.